Is Donald Trump starting a new war? The US is already struck in Iran with no immediate end in sight. And despite this, Trump and US armed forces are exerting massive pressure on yet another country. I'm Maras Joshi. This is Primetime India, and this is what's happening. Trump and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio have been railing against Cuba for several months. US armed forces have already formed a blockade around the nation. This has stopped the fuel supply. This has caused massive blackouts in Cuba. Fuel prices have gone through the roof, and even hospitals are suffering. But where exactly is Cuba? The tiny island nation lies in the Atlantic Ocean, just 90 miles away from the US coast. Cuba has a communist government, and it was a strong ally of Soviet Russia during the Cold War. Cuba is so close to the American mainland that it was significantly important to Soviet Russia. And because of this, the US and Cuba have been bitter enemies. The US has attacked Cuba multiple times in the past but stopped short of fully controlling the nation. That may soon be changing. The US has now charged Asian Cuban leader Raul Castro with conspiracy to kill US nationals, murder, and destruction of US aircraft. These charges are related to an incident in 1996 when Cuban fighter jets shot down two small civilian planes. These planes were owned by Cuban exiles staying in the US. Three US citizens were among the four people who were killed. Raul Castro was Cuban president at the time. Raul Castro is younger brother of the iconic Cuban revolutionary leader Fidel Castro. Raul Castro was Fidel's second in command during the 1959 Cuban Revolution, when they toppled Cuba's pro-US dictator Fulgencio Batista. The name Castro has immense unifying power in Cuba. And even though he is no more, Fidel Castro evokes romanticism of the past, and his role in the Cuban Revolution is often hailed as an example of tenacious struggle against the capitalist West. So it's now clear just how big a deal it is to accuse a person with the name Castro of a crime. But do these criminal charges slapped against Raul Castro by the US have any substance? Discussion is ongoing, but what's important is the timing. Now remember, just a few months ago, Trump ordered a daring raid in Venezuela to capture former President Nicolas Maduro. Venezuela has vast oil deposits, and in one stroke, the US raid removed the head of state of a hostile nation. Venezuela has been anti-US for decades, just like Cuba. Now, given all this, it is interesting to see if Trump is building an atmosphere to justify a similar raid in Cuba, and are these charges against Raul Castro going to be an excuse to capture him? It'll be really interesting to see this. Since he took office for his second term, President Trump has been openly talking about regime change in Cuba. He has already said that Cuba was ready to fall and it is in deep trouble. Cuba has been somewhat of a disdainful topic in America's conservative circles. Communist rule in Cuba has had its downsides over years. It's one thing to romanticize an ideology and another to mold it in a way that brings prosperity to common people. Now, during the Cold War, Cuba was heavily dependent on Soviet Union, and Soviet Union purchased Cuban sugar at preferential prices and provided subsidized oil, and this was of great importance to Cuba. Cuba did build strong healthcare and education systems during this period, but collapse of Soviet Russia in 1991 was a major catastrophe for Cuba. Its economy faced severe depression. Citizens could not get essential things they needed for basic survival. Prices skyrocketed. Cuba recovered with Venezuelan strongman Hugo Chavez's support. But due to a variety of internal reasons, the recovery was never fully complete. Then came COVID, economic shock followed. As per World Bank, Cuba had external debt of $19.7 billion in 2020. Waves of economic hardships over decades started massive exodus of people. The US is the closest country from Cuban shores. There are opportunities in US which perhaps will never be available in Cuba. Over decades, there have been waves of Cuban immigrants illegally reaching US shores using small boats. There is huge resentment because of this against Cuban immigrants in America's conservative circles. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio is known for his aggressive stance against Cuba, and the funny thing is Rubio himself is child of Cuban immigrants, but it's US politics, funny things keep on happening. So do we have another needless war at hand? Is US going to attack? Well, this can't be denied. The US Navy has already encircled Cuba, there is a blockade in place, and US Air Force is carrying out aggressive surveillance. The US can easily capture Raul Castro if it wants to, but it's definitely not going to be easy considering the fanatical support the name Castro has in Cuban hearts and minds to this day. Right now, there are signs of US intent to invade, but there's no clear guarantee, at least for now. If Trump decides to invade Cuba, it will be another entry in the long list of wars America started without clearing the mess it itself created in previous ones. I'm Manas Joshi on Primetime India. See you in the next one.